Thank you all for coming. I'm Theresia de Vrome. I'm a director of the Marymount Institute for Faith, Culture, and the Arts and a professor of English here at LMU. It is a great honor, great honor and privilege to welcome these two gentlemen, scholars, intellectuals here who've changed America forever. I want to thank a couple of people who have supported this event. Dean Bryant Alexander, Dean of College of Communication and Fine Arts. Dean Robin Crabtree, Bellarmine College of Fine Arts. Senior Vice President of Student Affairs, Kawana Lagat. Dean Joan Moore, School of Film and Television, and Provost Tom Poon. This event would never have happened without their really generous support, also the English department and the Department of African American Studies. I also want to acknowledge the Catholic workers who are here today, who have spent their lives working on the streets of Los Angeles, taking care of the poor and the homeless, and living with them. I especially want to thank the religious of the Sacred Heart of Mary. They are the Marymount piece of this university. They have been tireless in supporting our work here. They work with poor women and children, anti-racism. They know the redemptive quality of faith, culture, and the arts. In the words of Dorothy Day, they too believe that the world be saved by beauty. I also want to thank the Sisters of St. Joseph, whose Catholic hospitals, high schools, literacy programs, spiritual centers, and their resistance to trafficking, all kinds of extraordinary work, always supports us. I want to thank the Jesuits and the Jesuit community whose teaching of excellence and community as being men for others, the cura personalis, which they represent in their learning and teaching. The motto of the Marymount Sisters, the Religious of Sacred Heart of Mary, is that all may have life and live it to the full. And I think that's what we're celebrating tonight. I now want to introduce my colleague, friend, the poet Gail Vronsky. We have a tradition here at LMU of having a kind of prayer before we start, and she's actually going to read a poem as a prayer.
Theresia de Vrome. Hi, I'm going to read just a short poem by the great American poet Lucille Clifton. Won't you celebrate with me? Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up, here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Thank you.
So I would like to now introduce the Right Honorable Judge Irma Brown, who has been a Los Angeles Municipal Court judge since 1982 and became a Superior Court judge in 2000. Her area of judicial expertise is judicial offenders, and one of her mottos is, "One mistake does not have to determine your future." She's also a member of our Board of Trustees and an extraordinary person who has really shaped the way in which young people, at least in Southern California, get treated and get rehabilitated. She will introduce our guests.
Go Lions! Thank you, Theresia. It's certainly a distinct honor and a privilege to be here this evening with all of you. And on behalf of our president, Dr. Timothy Law Snyder, our chair of the board, Mr. Paul Viviano, and our religious orders, the entire administration, and our Board of Trustees, we are so excited to have you here and to have this opportunity to share with you the most critical thinkers in our time and in this generation, and we know that this is going to be an exciting time for them. Now, I didn't necessarily get invited because I was a judge. I'm retired now, so I don't wield the gavel anymore, and I've actually even moved to Texas, but I don't pack. I did here, but not there. This LMU Global Conversation Series about culture wars is being brought to us by the Global Conversation Series, the Marymount Institute. And I want to say that because when I was here some years ago, before we became Loyola Marymount University, and we were just Marymount College, renting space on the campus at Loyola University. We wanted to make sure that the traditions and the objectives, the goals of the Religious of the Sacred Heart, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange, and the women of Marymount College found a place on this campus. So this is truly an opportunity for Marymount to shine in its intellectual response to who we are in this transformational time. So I can't really tell you any more than you already know about these two distinguished scholars who sit to my right. I can tell you that they like to eat grapes and drink water because I was in the back room with them. But I can also tell you that they are delightful, delightful men, real, true men of character, of competency, and I can only tell you that this is going to be an afternoon that is unforgettable. Professor Henry Louis Gates has kindly consented to be the interviewer in this series of conversations that we're going to have on this very critical topic. You know him as Louis Henry Gates. Some refer to him as Skip. He is currently the Alphonse Fletcher University Professor and Director of the Hutchins Center for African American Studies and Research at Harvard University. He's also an Emmy-winning Peabody filmmaker. He is a literary scholar, a journalist, a cultural critic, and an institution builder. And he's the kind of man that's a generous man because he doesn't hold it all in. He shares his knowledge and his expertise with others to help us build the kind of world that we want to live in. So inclusivity is part of our strategic plan here at Loyola Marymount University. So as a member of the Board of Trustees, I'm the person who reports to the board on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And inclusion, equity, diversity comes in many forms and fashions. So we hope to broaden your perspectives this afternoon about how it's encompassed here at Loyola Marymount University, but also on a global perspective. Dr. Gates will be interviewing the renowned, affectionately known as Brother West, who is one of the definitive scholars in our country today, as I said earlier. He is chairman of the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Chair at Union Theological Seminary. He has a passion for honoring the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and telling the truth. I said telling the truth. His philosophy and his doctrine bears truth and promise to love and justice, and that's also one of our pillars here at Loyola Marymount University, is to the promotion of justice and honor among all people. So since you didn't really come to hear from me, I am reluctantly going to turn the mic over to the speakers. But should you want to hear from me again, I might be willing to come back. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with pride and pleasure on behalf of Loyola Marymount University, I present to you Dr. Henry Louis Gates and Dr. Cornel Cooper. Go Lions, let's give them a lion welcome.
That was perfect. Let's give it up for the judge, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, 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 yes. And let's give it up for Theresia DeVrom. Yes. Indeed, indeed, indeed. It was Theresia's idea this idea for this series all started with Wole Soyinka. And you know, Soyinka was here in the previous semester. Wole Soyinka, who became the first writer of color to receive the Nobel Prize in 1986, happened to be my professor. I was going to be a doctor. You know, I was raised to be a medical doctor. From my mother, well, we're on a religious campus, but I can say this. From my mother in heaven, there was a Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, and a medical doctor. You know what I'm talking about? So all smart little color boys and color girls had to be doctors. And I held on to that fantasy. My brother's an oral surgeon, so he did it before me. But when I went to the University of Cambridge, I met these two Africans who changed my life, Wole Soyinka and Kwame Anthony Appiah, Anthony was an undergraduate at Clare College, and Wole was there in exile from Nigeria because the Nigerian government was trying to kill him. They put him in jail for 2 years during the Biafran Civil War. When he got out, he wrote his prison memoir, attacking the government all over again. So they tried to kill him all over again. So he ended up being in England, and the three of us became friends, and they took me out to my first Indian meal, Cornell, and they plied me with all this wine, all this hot peppers, and then they said, you know, God sent us here to give you a message. You are never going to be a doctor, you idiot. You are going to go back and help to rebuild African and African-American studies. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, I cried at that dinner because that is what I really wanted to do, and that's what I thought deep down I dreamed deep down that God had put me on this planet to do. And I listened to them, and here I am all these years later. So my conversation with Wole was so much fun. Teresia said, why don't you do a series? And I come to LA all the time to film for a little series called Finding Your Roots. And my wife, Mariela Iglesias, the very distinguished Cuban historian, right there in the front row. Give it up for my wife.
Sister Mariel, Professor Iglesias.
So we come out now, you know, we get an Airbnb. We have a great place that we rent, Pacific Palisades. We can smell the ocean. You know, I really love it out here. It's great. So we're timing these conversations to overlap with my film trip. So in the fall, I'm here for 2 weeks. I'll be back in January, so we'll do the second one. And then we'll do the third one in the spring. And I said to Teresia, I will agree to do this under one condition, that you let me start with the man himself, Dr. Cornel West. Give it up for Cornel West. Because you know what I always say, that Cornel West, he's the best. Cornel,
Brother Skip.
you and I were both close to our mothers.
Indeed, indeed.
I want you to tell the audience about a person named Irene West and how Mrs. West influenced the Cornel West sitting here with me this afternoon.
Yeah, I think you need a moment of silence for that, my brother. And I would first want to do what she would have me to do, which is to say thank you for all who facilitated my coming, Sister Teresa and all the others, and the fact that I've been so blessed to set eyes up close to my brother who I met nearly 40 years ago, who has been such a source of inspiration. He's an intellectual giant. He's an entrepreneurial giant. He's a towering figure in the culture. And he, like me, he hates white supremacy and he loves black people. But he doesn't limit that love just from the chocolate side of town. His mother, Pauline, who was a towering figure, taught him that Jesus loves all the little children, all the children of the world, red and yellow, black or white. They are precious in his sight. Is that right, my brother?
That's right, that's true.
And he come out of Jim Crow South, West Virginia, Piedmont, 2,500 folk, 386 black folk.
That's right.
Cutting against the grain. Who would have thought that he would become not just an Alphonse professor at Harvard, but the fact that he becomes the major, not just the caretaker, but the person who allows us to gain access to the genius and talent of black culture and black history. That's who Skip Gates is. That's what my mother would want me to say. Absolutely.
Thank you, my brother.
No, it's true.
Thank you.
Your genius, your being a giant makes all the difference. And for me, you see, anytime he mentions Irene B. West or Clifton West or my brother Clifton, my sister Cynthia Sherrill, then I'm profoundly humbled because I really never be one half of the human beings they are. It's not a question of titles and status and worldly achievement. That for me is sounding brass and tinkling cymbal. It's empty, it's vacuous. If it doesn't have the central, concrete, genuine love at the center of it. And that's precisely what Irene B. West taught me by example. She didn't just talk about it. She exemplified it. She embodied it. She wasn't perfect or pristine. She wasn't free of spot or wrinkle, but you could see that orientation in her. And so when you have such high standards of moral and spiritual excellence, or what the Greeks would call arete, then you can only be so much of a gangster. The truth. And I've been a redeemed sinner with gangster proclivities all my life. But I couldn't make it to the crack house if I wanted to, because the memory of Irene, Brother Mark really Thomas, you know what I'm talking about, with Sylvia. Yes. So does Ava sitting next to you, exemplifying the same love. And my own wife understands it too, professor that she is, Anahita sitting next to Sister Marielle, distinguished philosopher and historian. And so when I first met Brother Skip, we were at Yale, you remember?
We were at Yale, baby professors.
Yeah, and it was just very clear that this brother had a vocation. He was reading all the time. He was always on fire, bubbling over. He had a calling. This is very important for students. I know Brother Will Pruitt is here somewhere. Where's Brother Will?
Right on the right.
There he is. Just got a PhD from Harvard. Give it up for this brother.
Our student.
So,
That's right.
a student of Brother Skip. There he is. There he is.
Yeah.
There he is. There he is.
Thank
Student of
you.
Skip Gates. I was blessed to be on this committee.
Thank you.
And he was also my head TF teaching fellow, and he's now at UCLA as a fellow. But we say that because young folk, when you look at Skip Gates, too many people see his career and don't see his calling. You see the glitz and the blitz of his profession, and you don't see the blood, sweat, and tears of his vocation. And he's somebody who has been true to his calling and vocation. And that means it cuts against the grain of the spiritual decay and moral decrepitude of our market-driven society, obsessed with just making it rather than keeping the faith. And here I am at Loyola Marymount University. And where's my nun sisters? Where's the nun sisters? Stand up, stand up, stand up.
Right
Let's
there.
give it up to the nun sisters. We talking about vocation. We talking about calling. We talking about love warriors. That's what we, and we should note, class of 1964, this place, the greatest pioneering scholar of Afro-American religion in the history of the American empire. His name was Albert Roberto.
That's right.
Graduated from here.
Yeah.
Bobo.
Yeah, Bobo.
What year would Bobo come out? What
I don't
year you think?
What
he'd
year
be?
Bobo come out?
We got Bobo's brother here somewhere. Is Chris here somewhere? He went out to the bathroom. But when he comes back, give us a report of when his brother graduated from Loyola. No, we send our salute to it. But I say all that to say, in all seriousness, though, that to be on the same stage as Brother Skip is a homecoming. We wrote a book in 1996.
Future of the Race.
The Future of the Race. We traveled all around the country. We had a magnificent time together.
We had a lot of fun.
We had a whole lot of fun. And that's the thing about it. You see, when you're actually true to your calling, you have a joy.
When your vocation is your avocation.
That's it, brother. That's it, which is to say you never have a vacation.
That's right.
Oh, I understand. I understand. No, you don't need a vacation when you have a. But that's very important because you see, so much of American culture is a joyless quest for insatiable pleasure.
That's right.
You can get any kind of pleasure you want. Titillation, stimulation, up, down, round and around, everything. But you still leave empty. Your soul is still vacuous because you don't have a joy. The great Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, discipleship, the follower, to be a fallible, finite, fallen follower of Jesus of Nazareth, is to have a joy that the world didn't give you and the world can't take away. You find joy in emptying yourself, giving yourself, putting a smile on other people's face, enabling them, empowering them. That is vocation. And so when you see my dear brother on television, I want you to keep that in mind because it's that sense of calling and vocation going all the way back to Pauline and Henry Louis Gates Sr. And I know him. He was a magnificent human being and a great storyteller. And they put that in Brother Skip, you see. And a lot of times people miss that when you look at Brother Skip. I had to remind folk of that. People, what you think about Skip? Saw him on television last night. Well, I don't watch TV that much, but I know he was brilliant. I said, but did you keep track of the fire in his soul and the joy in his heart along with his intellectual genius? That's very important. Because if we lose sight of that joy in the heart and that tremendous fire in the soul and the sense of vocation, then all of us just get caught with careerism, opportunism, or obsessed with the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. Because if everybody's just trying to make it, it's survival of the slickest. And now, this grand institution, 1865 in the Marymount College with the sisters. Where would the brothers be without the sisters? Let's just be honest about it.
That's true.
And that 50 years ago, they're coming together to the greater glory of God. Yes, we want to be a light. Fannie Lou Hamer used to sing that song. This little light of mine.
That's right.
I'm going to let it shine. I was blessed to write a song with one of the great artists, the funk master, Bootsy Collins, called Star. He said, star is not an entity in the sky. It's something that shines. And there used to be a brother every fifth Sunday that played in my church, Shiloh Baptist Church on the chocolate side of Sacramento, California. And he wrote a song called what? Everybody is a star. Everybody can shine. So don't get locked into this narrow, truncated perception of the stars being some glitz and blitz entity on a stage. No, not at all. He or she is great, and the greatest among you will be your servant, will be those who have a quality of life and love and compassion to take a risk, will have a courage to love, and not in the spirit of self-righteousness, but a serious sense of wanting to spread the best of who we are. And that's one of the things Mom used to say to us all the time. Honey, if the kingdom of God is within you, then everywhere you go, you ought to leave a little heaven behind. Now, that's wisdom.
That's wisdom.
That's insight. You don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to be a Buddhist. You don't have to be Judaic. You don't have to be Confucius. You can be anything and still learn something from that insight. Because our world is overcome by the hounds of hell. The greed and the hatred and the hypocrisy and the fear and the moral cowardliness. Everybody want to be so well-adjusted to injustice. Just for status. Well-adapted to indifference. Just for approval of an establishment. So what, says Miles Davis.
He did indeed.
So what, says Les McCann. So what from those who come out of a history of being hated for 400 years and keep dishing out love warriors and terrorized for 400 years and keep dishing out freedom fighters and traumatized for 400 years and keep dishing out wounded healers. and so much sorrow and sadness, and yet here come these people producing joy spreaders. We were looking at Louis Armstrong last night, right, man? Oh, Louis got so much joy in him. It's just flowing everywhere.
Couldn't stop smiling.
And it was just for real, but they also said what? They saw him in the studio. He's the saddest man I ever saw in my life. That's what some of the musicians said. How can you be the saddest man and full of so much joy? Well, it's like the Negro spiritual that Du Bois begins souls of black folk with. Brother Will knows what I'm talking about. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. What's that last line, Will? Glory. Hallelujah. Where does that joy come from? It's not rational. It's not logical. Based on the evidence, it doesn't lead toward that conclusion. But that's exactly what you're looking at when you're looking at Brother Skip Gates on television. Oh, yeah.
Cornel,
Yes,
Cornel,
indeed.
I got a list of questions from these people.
All right.
And they're going to fire me if I can't get another question in here.
Lord.
So this is a question. No, but give it up for Cornel. Wasn't that beautiful?
No.
That's beautiful. Cornel, what of all the things that you could have studied, what drew you to studying philosophy? I've never asked you this. I've just taken it for granted that you are a great philosopher, but I've never asked you what drew you to the study of philosophy and then to making teaching into a calling, your vocation and your avocation. Because you were a polymath. You had choices. Why philosophy?
Yeah, I've never been asked that question, no, brother. You know, there used to be a little bookmobile out in Glen Elder, in Sacramento, where I grew up. I know Brother McNeil is here somewhere. I don't know where he is from Sacramento. But I remember picking up a book. I read biographies of Albert Einstein and a whole host of others. But there was a book by Will Durant called The Story of Philosophy.
Of philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they only had a few books in the bookmobile, so you had to reread the same books over and over, which is fine. It's just fine. Just like a jazz musician, you know, you body and soul, yeah, let's play it again. Louis Coleman, I see that he got his version, so-and-so got it. But that book hit me hard. It really did. And it was about philosophy, about love of wisdom. Now, when I got to Harvard, I pulled that book out. I had W.V. Quine, John Rawls. We had Robert Nozick, who was my tutor. And he said, why do you want to be a philosopher? I pulled out The Story of Philosophy, put it on the table. Picked it up. Dang, this thing is barely holding together. How many times you read this thing? About 4 or 5 times. And they said, yeah, we're going to teach you real philosophy at Harvard, analytical philosophy.
Right.
You know, and that's going to be Frege and company. And so I held on. But I always felt that philosophy should go to school not simply with science and mathematics and logic, but it should go to school with poetry. It should go to school with history. It should go to school with storytelling,
With
and
music.
narratives, and music.
Yeah.
Poetry and music, of course, going hand in hand.
How old were you when you read Will Durant's book?
Lord have mercy. I'm just trying to think which Smokey Robinson song was out at. It wasn't Shop Around, no. I think it's Tracks of My Tears. I must have been about 11.
Wow.
About 11.
And did your parents say, how are you going to provide for your family? How are you going to eat? Philosophers.
There was some consideration. So it was. But Mom, you know, she fundamentally believed in the Black national anthem, which is lift every voice, not lift every echo. And so she wanted me to find my voice, just like a jazz woman or a blues man. You got to find your voice.
Yep.
She would do everything she could to make sure I found my voice. When I found my voice, there I was reading philosophy, wanting to write, and wanting to connect the life of the mind and the world of ideas to the struggle for freedom.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Martin King and Malcolm X and Angela Davis and Erica Huggins and others. They meant the world to me coming up. And so I was working in the Black Panther Party's breakfast program. I was working in the prison program. And I couldn't join the party because it was so secular and atheistic and agnostic. And I understood it because oftentimes the gods that they were rejecting were gods that I was rejecting too. But I was already a Jesus-loving, free black man. So if I couldn't take Jesus with me, then I could work with them, and I couldn't be in the party. And I said, I'm not the one missing out, y'all. I just want to be clear about that. I'm not the one, because remember, they used to have a handkerchief head, Nigger, every week. Remember the Black Panther Party newspaper? It was always a preacher.
Yeah, always.
I was saying, like, I know we got a lot of preachers who have sold their souls for a mess of pottage, but what about the lawyers and the doctors and the pharmacists and others? Can we have other candidates every once in a while? Next week, another preacher.
You know, I interviewed Eldridge Cleaver and Kathleen, as you know, when they were underground in Paris. I was 22 years old. I just graduated from Yale on my way to graduate school at Cambridge, and I got a job writing for Time magazine in London. So the first story I suggested was on black expatriates.
Oh, yeah.
And they were there, and they were there in Paris. So I interviewed them. And I asked Cleaver, what was the principal mistake that the Panthers made? And he said, we tried to kill Jesus.
Is that what he said?
Yeah. He
That's
said, there could be no political organization among the African-American people without the church. And we did not know that, and we had to learn that the painful way. Do you think that's still true? First of all, do you think he was right? And secondly, do you think that's still true?
Well, I think the larger issue is that when you actually try to genuinely love people, especially a people who've been taught to hate themselves, especially in oppressed people, you have to begin where they are, which means you have to understand their history. What has gone into the preserving of black sanity and black dignity? And you can't answer that question without talking about the black church at its best. What else did black people have? 244 years of the most barbaric slavery in recorded modern time. An average slave was killed at 27 years old. What else did we against the law to worship God without white supervision? So you had to steal away at night in a rain shout, in the dark, in the midnight hour, and lift your voice and sing a song. And we still singing those songs of the spirituals. 258 of them recorded. So what else did we have? We can't understand the history of these peoples without understanding the history of the institutional armor that they created, which was a church. Now, that same institution, of course, shot through with patriarchy, with homophobia, and transphobia, and class arrogance, and a whole host of other things, indeed. But all of those things didn't exhaust or didn't suffocate and eliminate the unbelievable genius, talent, creativity, and dignity of black folk. And so when Cleaver says, well, we tried to kill the church, is that, well, no, you didn't understand what went into the making of black peoples in the modern world in the face of all of that tear and hatred and trauma and so forth. So it's a matter really of trying to be candid and honest enough to say, well, when you really love somebody, you got to understand where they come from. And to try to understand what they come from means you have to understand their context. What goes into the shaping and molding of them. And that's true for anybody. That's true in one-on-one relationships.
In any relationship.
Any relationship.
And engaging in any kind of social change.
Absolutely.
So Cornel, as you very well know, every black autobiography, starting with the slave narratives, has a crucial scene when, in the case of the slave narratives, the narrator discovers that he or she is enslaved. After slavery, the narrator discovers that he or she is black. And it is invariably a painful experience. I'm thinking with Frederick Douglass. And as you know, 4 times in the first chapter, he says, my father was my master was my father. It is so whispered. So he doesn't know his father. But then he says the most painful thing is that he doesn't know his birthday. Now think about that, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
I always ask my students, as Will could attest, what's the most painful thing Frederick Douglass said about being slavery? What was the condition that defined the state of enslavement in your life under bondage? People guess brutality. They guess all sorts of things. And nobody guesses what the man says. He says, I couldn't tell my birthday. White kids, free kids knew their birthday. Enslaved kids could only tell the time by the passing of the seasons. That's so uncanny that he would say that. With W.E.B. Du Bois, Cornel, as you know, there's a strange little girl, comes to his school in Great Barrington Integrated School. The children are sharing greeting cards.
Yeah.
And this little white girl refused to take his card because he's black. And that's when he says the veil came down, the veil of racism. When did that happen to you, Cornel? Did you have an experience like that, and would you share it with us?
I had an experience, but it didn't have the same impact as Brother Douglass and Brother Du Bois. I had a wonderful vanilla track coach, Bill Mahan, who took me on the white side of town. He was trying to teach me to learn how to swim, which was an impossible task. Impossible. I knew it and he knew it, but we kept at it. But he allowed me to get in his pool. When I got in the pool, all the white brothers and sisters jumped out and they emptied the pool.
No.
Oh yeah.
Wow. What year is that?
Right, I was about then. I'm almost a teenager trying to learn how to stroke and swim.
In Sacramento?
In Sacramento.
I thought it was a liberal out here.
Now, liberal means Jim Crow Jr. Psychically, residentially, socially, economically, it's just Jim Crow Jr., that's all. But Junior's still, softer than Senior,
So
it's still wrong.
How did this
But the
affect
thing was,
you?
but it didn't affect me that much. I mean, I just said to myself, dang, these people, they just spiritually sick and pathological. I ain't got time for this kind of mess. It's true, because I look at the world through black lens. I'm not concerned with the white normative gaze. I'm not concerned. I don't look for anybody to get their permission as to how I view the world and how I proceed and who I love and how I laugh and how I dance and how I walk. I'm already a free man. So I had all of this power behind the veil, in the language of the great Du Bois in his eulogy of Alexander Crummell. I had all this rich black tradition behind me. I want to know what grandmama thought. Did she think that I was someone with spiritual strength and concerned about moral excellence and willing to tell the truth no matter what's going on? I was blessed to walk in with my real brother Bill Barham. Give it up for brother Professor Bill Barham, one of the great pioneers. One of the great pioneers, and his brother's my dear brother, President Dominguez Hills, California State University, was just there. Same traditions. We fall back on these traditions, you see. And it means then that you get freed up. Take, for example, what's going on right now in Iran. The sisters, strong, fighting. Where's the voices? Where's the feminist voices? Where's the progressive voices? Those precious sisters in Iran have exactly the same value as a vanilla sister in Los Angeles, a brown sister in East Los Angeles, a black sister in South Central, and a black brother and sister in Ethiopia. That's what it means to be free and say, I'm going to be morally consistent and not be preoccupied with the pettiness of white supremacy or male supremacy or predatory capitalist orientations, anything that loses sight of the humanity of people. That's what we got to fight. And it means you're forever on a battlefield. You're forever on a battlefield. People say you can't say nothing about Palestine. How come? It's too controversial. Keep track of the suffering. The great Bonhoeffer used to say what? He he would walk into the German churches and say, you don't have a right to engage in Gregorian chants if you don't hear the cries of the precious Jewish brothers and sisters. That's Dietrich Bonhoeffer, executed by a gangster named Hitler. And the same would be true for Palestinian voices. Same would be true for Dalit voices in India. Same would be true for the Roma and Gypsy voices across the board. Why? Because they're made in the image of God. And they have a sanctity and a dignity. Dorothy Day always understood this. Where's Brother Jeff Dietrich? Where's Brother? Just stand up, brother. Stand up. He's been arrested 42 times. 42 times, this brother. Take your hat off so people can see you. There you go. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Dorothy Day. And what did she say when Martin was shot down like a dog in Memphis? Right on the top of the Catholic Worker newspaper. Martin Luther King Jr. learned how to die daily, and just dropped the mic. That's all she needed to say. Because when you learn how to die, you try to kill that coward in you, and kill that narcissism in you, and kill that hedonism in you, and kill that fear in you. Thou shalt have no fear. Rather be a corpse than a coward. Rather be dead than afraid. That's the tradition that's kept not just black people going, oppressed people, be they Jewish, Irish, Palestinian, Iranian, across the board. And of course, the great Christian message is that, oh, we are tied to a power that says, lo, I will be with you as you bear witness in your cruciform life. Tied to the way of love, crushed by the dominant ways of the world, but never eliminated, just like the drops at that cross. Those drops of love at the cross. Thought they completely laid to bear and completely eliminated this Palestinian Jew, the greatest empire of its day. No, those drops transformed into love, and that way of love caught on and became so contagious, absurd, but also so alluring that many folk held on for dear life anyway. It made leaps of faith anyway. And that's one of the reasons why we're here.
It's true.
That's one of the reasons why we're here, you see. And we have to be candid about that, because if we lose sight of those kinds of legacies, and Christians have no monopoly on this, our Judaic brothers and sisters, the Abraham Joshua Heschels and Susanna Heschels and others, the Michael Lerners and others, our Irish brothers and sisters, the Samuel Beckett's, lapsed, Irish, Protestant, try again, fail better. Try again, fail again, fail better. So Christian, so Christocentric, so cross-centered, but tied to a love. Tied to a love.
But Cornel, that makes me think about the changes that we've seen together. So many changes in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Can you share with us your thoughts about how the world of race, the world of the color line, as Du Bois put it, how's it changed over the last 60 years or so, particularly when we see the rise of white supremacy rearing its ugly head in ways that many of us thought naively would be impossible. But it's here.
Yeah. You know, part of it, though, Brother Skip, is that we've too often lost sight of what Martin Luther King Jr. and Fannie Lou Hamer, John Coltrane's Love Supreme, Stevie Wonder's Love in Need of Love was all about. Because what happened was race became a construct that was disconnected from class, disconnected from empire, and even disconnected from gender, even though gender tried to get in. And so many people began to think, well, the struggle against white supremacy is the struggle for success in the predatory capitalist structure and success within the empire. That was one of the reasons why when we got a black face of the American empire, folks started breakdancing, making MC Hammer look like a Cub Scout. Now, I was breakdancing too, but just for a few hours. Because I knew when my dear brother Barack Obama, who I'd worked so very hard for 65 events for free, I knew that was because of the blood, sweat, and tears of all the folk before. Hundreds of years of sacrifice before. He didn't do it all by himself. But once race was disconnected from class and empire, and once race no longer made it a priority to begin with the least of these, that's the biblical criteria. What's happening on the block? Mass incarceration regime. What's happening with the decrepit school systems? What's happening with the indecent housing? What's happening with massive unemployment and underemployment? What's happening with bombs being dropped around the world? I mean, Brother Barack Obama won a Peace Prize. He had 6 wars going on at the same time. He's dropping 25,000 bombs every year, but he got a Peace Prize. And you say, hey, what's going on? That's Marvin Gaye's question. What's going on? I call it a Keith Sweat moment. Something just ain't right. Something just ain't right. We can love Obama because he's struggling against white supremacy. We can love Obama because he's brilliant. We can love Obama because his wife is magnificent and his children are precious. But if he's dropping bombs, he's dropping bombs. If his drones are killing poor people in Somalia and Pakistan, Bush had 45. I call Bush a war criminal. Obama had 563. He's a war criminal. And they say, Brother West, how come you're so hard on the brother? How come, don't you know he's black? I love the brother. That's why I'm telling him the truth. But I'm also committed to the people who are suffering. That has more weight and gravity than being successful in an empire and a class-skewed hierarchy. So what happened was the success of the black middle class became the litmus test of racial progress. And there's no serious focus on what's happening to everyday people, to ordinary people, poor people, working people. That's precisely how you end up with an expansion of a black middle class and a far more intense expansion of a mass incarceration regime. You talked about this with great, with great insight.
You know, the principal effect of affirmative action was, he's absolutely right, it doubled the size of the black middle class and quadrupled the size of the black upper middle class. But if you look at the percentage of black children living at or beneath the poverty line, it stayed shockingly consistent for decades, precisely when the curve of class for the elite in the black community was rising.
Exactly.
And
But
that
up here, you know,
Cornel is right. Our analysis, we thought that racism was so total, so oppressive, that we couldn't imagine that it was a metaphor for something else, that it stood for something else, that it was imbricated in a system of oppression that had another face, but the face somehow remained hidden. There were exceptions which you can share with the audience of people who understood that race and class were jointly.
Bell Hooks and Glenn Ford, a Black Agenda report, that there are a number of prophetic voices who understood this. Of course, the great Cedric Robinson understood this. But
and
their
MLK,
and Martin Luther King, Martin.
At the end.
Malcolm did too.
Yeah.
Ella Baker, oh Lord, she's so. But so many times these voices get drowned out, partly because you got a corporate media that is so narrow and truncated in the alternatives that people have access to. So you got Fox News, mean-spirited, cold-hearted, crypto-fascist, sometimes more explicitly fascist, right? Then you got CNN, MSNBC, milquetoast, neoliberal. No serious critique of Wall Street, no focus on poor people, no focus on the trade union movement. It's just how well the black middle class is doing. We want somebody who looks like us. Oh, Clarence Thomas looks just like you. He's a beautiful black man. Clarence is a beautiful black man aesthetically, spiritually, morally. He sides with the wealthy, with the rich, consistently, which means he's a foe. Now, I'm a Christian, so I love my folks, but I understand that he is on the other side of the battlefield politically and ideologically, though as a human being, he is someone who's worthy of our love in terms of acknowledging the fact that he's made in the image of God. But what happened is now we got a whole politics that last 50 years. Brother Mark understands this better than any. He's spending all this time on the homeless. He's spending all this time on poverty as an elected official. You know how rare that is? How rare that is? Meaning what? Meaning that it became a choice between now neo-fascism and neoliberalism. And the neoliberal order is being dissolved. It is losing its legitimacy. It is unable to fully develop and deliver in such a way that people will ascribe to its policies. And when people are backs against the wall and given the deep white supremacy in the country, if you don't have a progressive left alternative, people will prefer a neo-fascist one. And that's exactly what we're witnessing right now. And in America, neo-fascism will always have a white supremacist public face. It will focus on black folk. It will focus on brown folk. It will focus on Jews. It will focus on Arabs. It will focus on Muslims. But always acknowledge that in the background is big money and big military.
Well, Cornel, out of that, how would you assess the health of democracy today? Both, let's start with the United States, and then let's move globally.
Lord, I'm glad we at Loyola Marymount. Yeah, these Catholic brothers and sisters, they tell the truth. At their best. We know they got gangsters and thugs too, like everybody. No, that's true. They're human beings. They're human beings, you know. But no, I mean, the democracy is on life support. You already had a truncated democracy in place in the first place because you had big money so completely colonizing it. I mean, Russell Fingo was right when he left. What did he say? He said, U.S. Congress is a site of legalized bribery and normalized corruption. That's why I'm leaving. He's telling the truth. He's telling the truth. Every politician knows if you're not a fundraiser, you're not going to make it.
No, right.
You got to have big money.
Continuously.
Continuously. Which means then that big money selects who already is being offered to the people. And by the time the people are offered the candidates and they see how narrow the candidates are, look at Georgia right now. Can you imagine? Herschel and his football?
Oh, my God.
Herschel and his football.
And he could win, man.
Oh, no, I think he's got a good chance of winning. A good chance of winning.
But that's ridiculous.
But we don't want to focus on Brother Herschel. Brother Herschel is just one small sign of a whole wave of less than mediocre folk, many themselves xenophobes, who have big money behind them. And when you have that money behind you and people are told lies over and over and over and over again, and then Trump comes in with his folk and talks about how wonderful he is, you say, oh, this democracy about gone. It's about gone.
But Cornel, how could America elect Barack Obama twice? And for many of us, that's America at its finest. And Barack Obama is followed by Donald Trump. Walk us through this, dear philosopher.
Oh, well, I appreciate that question. We should be asking you some of these questions, but I know you got an
No, I'm the interviewer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, many of us were breakdancing when Barack Obama won, not only because it was a blow against white supremacy, but because it also held off mediocre folk like John McCain and Romney and company. So keep in mind, it's a relative choice. It's a relative choice. The first thing Barack Obama did when he got in office in terms of substantive policy was what? Bailed out Wall Street rather than homeowners. Black middle class lost 58% of their wealth. Wall Street was given welfare for 2.5 years. Trillions of dollars coming right out of the public bank. The bank. They're doing magnificent. They break dancing to the bank. and working class people and middle class folk losing their fundamental source of wealth. So it was clear when Larry Summers and company providing the advice for Barack Obama, it was clear Barack Obama didn't have the courage to fight Wall Street. That's what I love about Brother Bernie. You can say anything you want about Brother Bernie Sanders. He had the courage to tell the truth about organized greed on Wall Street. Wall Street in 2008 and 2009 engaged in massive crimes, insider trading, market manipulation, embezzlement, fraudulent activity. How many Wall Street gangsters went to jail? None. Zero. Zero. What did Brother Barack say in March of 2009 when he went to Wall Street? He said, and they got it right in the confidence book of Suskind's text, he said, don't worry, I'm on your side. He said, I know I stand between you and the pitchfork. I'm on your side. Well, see, I come out of a tradition that says that's what you say for poor and working people. Wall Street doesn't need presidents or more politicians who tell them, I'm on your side. I don't care what color you are. If you're going to be courageous and talk in the name of working people and poor people, you tell Wall Street, and for me, in the name of Jesus, you've been greedy for too long. Those who committed crime are going to jail just like Jamal and Letitia. When they get caught with something in the street, they go to jail. When you do something wrong, you go into jail. I say the same thing to the police department. Police departments, you shoot Jamal and Letitia and Juanita, we're going to have a fair trial, and we're going to send you to jail. And we're going to see how many of y'all just keep doing it. Keep doing it. How come? We believe in fairness, equality under the law. So what that means then is that Barack gets in with all of this magnificent support. And it was the black folks, especially black women, that got him over, just like Biden wouldn't be president now if it wasn't for black women.
True.
That's a fundamental fact.
Yep.
Black women saved America from fascism. They saved America from fascism. There's no doubt about that. But if you're not hitting the issues of poverty and higher wages and quality wages, I know they got a struggle going on right here over wages. Is that right? Got one going on right here, right here. And you just tell Loyola Marymount with love and in the name of Jesus, Jesus ran out the money changers because he perceived them as being indifferent to the plight of the poor. I just want to follow Jesus. I'm not going to run them out, but I'm going to organize and make sure the workers have jobs with a living wage.
Yeah.
That's all it is. That's all it is. You don't need to demonize anybody. Don't demonize anybody. You know, the president is not a demon or anything. The president's doing his job. And his job in part is to keep the status quo in place with some small incremental changes. Okay, Brother Timothy, beautiful. Fine. We support you when you're doing something good, but we're going to raise our voices when the least of these, the vulnerable of us, are not being treated with dignity and fairness. Don't get it twisted. We ain't trying to trash nobody. We are trying to bear witness. And that's true across the board. That's what Barack Obama needed to do. That's what he needed to do.
So how do you get Trump out of that, Corn? But how do you get Trump out of that?
You got Trump out of that because
Walk us through this. He supported Wall Street.
Exactly.
That was a big mistake, you're saying.
That's
so
right.
then get us to Donald Trump.
Because Trump's neo-fascist movement is predicated on a hatred and a contempt of neoliberal elites, of the professional managerial class that has been the winners in the economy with more and more money as poor and working people are pushed to the margins. And Trump's major point, besides the vicious white supremacy against our precious immigrants, beginning with the Mexicans and Chicanos and so on, besides the misogyny, besides the trashing of black folk, is his people can't stand neoliberal professional elites. They have no legitimacy in their eyes. And one of the reasons they have no legitimacy in their eyes is because prior to Trump, you had Democratic Party elites who were looking down on them as if they were deplorable, which is the language of Sister Hillary, deplorables. And see, my attitude is always, as a Christian, I look for wickedness in high places first. I know there's wickedness on the ground among poor folk, but I want to start at the top. Where are the gangsters and the thugs and the greedy folk at the top? Oh, yes. It's just like in your university. And we struggle with this all the time, you know, at Harvard and Yale. Well, you know, we don't want this black person because they really haven't met the kind of standards we think they ought to meet. And we were in the meeting one time and said, well, let's tell a history about white male mediocrity.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
No, we did.
How did he get his job?
No, it's true.
How'd you get your job? You see, everybody at the top not meeting the most sophisticated meritocratic criteria. You got a whole history of white mediocrity at the top.
No, I have to tell you this. My mentor, Cornel knows this story, but I have to share it.
Oh, yeah.
My mentor, the man who hired me at Harvard, was the greatest dean in the history of the American Academy, Henry Rossofsky.
Oh, he's a giant now, ain't no doubt.
And he said, look, we're going to give you all these resources. You're here. You're going to create the greatest center of black studies in history. That's what he said to me. You got to do it. I said, okay. He said, who are you going to go after? I said, I'm going to go after the superstars. Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham.
Oh, yeah.
Jamaica Kincaid.
Yeah.
Cornel West.
Well,
William Julius Wilson.
yeah.
And he said, okay, you're being very ambitious. He didn't even know we could do that, but we hired all those people. But then he said, you know, not every black scholar's got to be Du Bois, young man. He said, you can't hire a genius all the time. As a matter of fact, it would take you 100 years for the people you hired, if you hired average scholars in African American studies, it would take 100 years for you to rival the mediocrity that's at Harvard already.
That's what Rossofsky said.
That was Rossofsky.
I forgot about
and
that.
I never forgot that.
I forgot about that.
Not everybody's got to be a genius. But anyway, go ahead, because you're on a roll. Because you still got to get us.
But we on the way from Brother Obama to Brother Trump.
Yeah, that's right.
We on the way.
Because, okay, people were disillusioned. People had no hope. And you know, I grew up in a working class town with working class white people who loved me. They told me the summer before that election on Martha's Vineyard, because they come up and stay with me, 7 women I started first grade with, the last day of August 1956. 6 white, 1 black, in a paper mill town. Called me Skippy. They said, Skippy, we're going for Trump for all the reasons that you said. They said, we have no hope. It used to be our children would go to college and do better than we have done. But that's over, and that we need a new plan. We need a new answer, and we're going with Donald Trump.
You remember that we called, our dear brother Barack Obama, for a Marshall Plan for the cities.
Right?
We called for a war against poverty. This is just what Martin was calling for in 1968. Right. We called for a cutback in the military budget. Every 53 cents for $1 in the U.S. budget goes to the military. That's why we got 800 military units around the world. China got 31. Soviet Union got 17. With all of this vicious treatment of our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, Russian gangsters ought to be ashamed of themselves. It's true.
Oh, yeah.
It's true. But when you got 800, that's a lot of money. And like any empire, the Roman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, across the board, when you have military overreach, when more and more of the money that ought to be going to your children's education, ought to be going to jobs with a living wage, ought to be going with health care across the board rather than market-driven health care, then you're going to end up having to have austerity programs, austerity perceptions when it comes to schools, health care, when it comes to jobs with a living wage. And all you need to see is anytime the United States goes to war, Afghanistan, Iraq, look at the invasion and occupation of Iraq based on a lie. 500,000 people dead. Iraqi life has exactly the same value as a life at Loyola Marymount University.
Sure.
You see, all that money shifted. Barack increases the military budget every year. We call for war against poverty. We call for Marshall Plan. No. So what happens is you're going to get a populist response. It can either be left-wing or it can be right-wing. And right-wing populism leads toward neo-fascism in America.
Right.
Because of the hatred of black people and brown people.
Dipping in to white supremacy, which runs like a stream under the floorboards of American culture.
Brother, it's like a serpent wrapped around the legs of the table upon which the Declaration of Independence was signed by the founding fathers.
So how do we get out of this, Corn? How do we get out?
We can only get out by telling the truth and bearing witness, though. Keep in mind, though, that there's a slice of Trump's people who voted for Brother Bernie Sanders.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Why did they vote for Bernie Sanders? They were looking for an alternative to the milquetoast neoliberal rule with the arrogance and the condescension and the rationalization of class hierarchy and the rationalization of military operations around the world. You see. And if they didn't get it with Bernie, and we should note, because I was with Bernie in November when we won, and we were ahead.
Yeah.
And what happened that night? Barack Obama made a phone call. Am I telling the truth, Brother Will, or what? Because I got to get my empirical investigation, because Will gets evidence, you see.
So who did he call?
He called the three candidates who were in the race to drop out. You all remember that? They dropped out immediately. Biden had 3.5% of the vote then. Pete, got to go. Amy, got to go. How come? Anybody but Bernie. How come anybody but Bernie? What if a left-wing populist can beat a right-wing populist? What if Bernie could beat Trump? What if working people can be empowered? Too many of the neoliberals believed they'd rather have a milquetoast neoliberal who's just barely limping down the road than Trump, who was on fire every day. And let's just keep this in mind in terms of corporate media. Because corporate media admitted that they covered every comma,
Every day, 24/7.
How come?
They still cover
Money, eyeballs, revenue, profits. And what did the CEO say? We know it's bad for America, but it's good for us. That's how you lose your democracy. Greed over common good. Greed over public life. Bernie had 18,000 people there, and we run into it. Brother got a camera bouncing up against a tree, can't focus on the folk right. I say, hey, man, look at all these people. I know my camera's not working the way it ought to work. And Trump got 25 cameras up there.
No question.
And why? Because he's so entertaining that people would turn to that channel
All day long
for their advertising.
So how do we get, so what's going to happen, Corn? Is Biden, first of all, if his health is good?
Well, pray for him. He's a human being.
Okay, but let's presume,
He got a precious family, you know.
But let's presume that his health is good and he runs again. What's going to happen?
If he runs again?
Yeah.
Oh, Lord. No. If the Democratic Party can't do better than produce Biden once again.
All right, let's say he doesn't run, and he decides he's too old, he's had his time.
Yeah.
So give us a scenario that's going to keep Donald Trump. Or let me put it this way. Is there a scenario
There's got to be.
that you can envision that would put Donald Trump back in the White House?
Well, we've got to have a massive anti-fascist coalition across the board.
Can we do that?
But the coalition can't be tied just to electoral politics. We've got to have a moral, spiritual awakening and renaissance where people hit the streets. Me and Brother Jeff, we're going back to jail, brother. We're just going back to jail. And we're not going by ourselves. We're going with a whole lot of folk. Why? Because we're trying to bear witness and we recognize we got a decrepit system. And even though it's decrepit, you have to work with it, no doubt. And so you need an anti-fascist coalition. Because even given all of the problems with the American empire and American democratic experiment, Fascism is the erasure of democratic practices and sensibilities. We wouldn't be able to have this dialogue.
No way.
Under those conditions at all.
No,
You know?
we'd be in jail.
Absolutely. And yet we should not acknowledge that the dominant tendencies on the globe, in many ways, are much more fascist than anything else. That's what's happening in Italy. That's Sweden. But 30% in Sweden. You see? Hungary already. Look at Brazil. 43% of our Brazilian brothers and sisters vote for a gangster who is proud to be a gangster.
And proud to be endorsed by Donald Trump.
Gangsters go with gangsters. No, that's very real. Because gangsters come in all colors. You all know that. They come in all genders. They come in all sexual orientations. They come in all religions.
So how do we reverse that trend globally?
You got to have international solidarity. You got to raise voices when people are being crushed. It could be in our beloved Cuba, pushed to jail, dissident voices and so forth. Raise your voice consistently. Left wing, center, or right is wrong. It could take place in Uruguay. It could take place in Venezuela. It could take place in Saudi Arabia. It could take place across the board. And that's what I mean by a moral, spiritual renaissance, because you can't have a democracy in the end if you don't have a citizenry as opposed to just waves of consumers. And you can't have a democracy if all you have are primarily spectators rather than participants. And who taught that better than black folk in America? Who had more evidence of the vicious, fascist attacks and assaults on black folk for almost 400 years? Frederick Douglass, why'd you do it? Harriet Tubman, why'd you do it? Ida B. Wells, why'd you do it, sister? Malcolm, how come you kept telling the truth? Martin, why'd you bear witness? 31 times in jail, Martin. And what's their response? Because we love the people. Their needs are sacred. They're worthy of living for and dying for. And our legacy will be operating and at work no matter how dark and dim and grim times are, because we would have shined our light in such a way that somebody will remember what we tried to say and do. That's the only reason why American democracy is here. Not just black people. It's American democracy. Because if black people had chosen black versions of the Ku Klux Klan, there would be a civil war every generation. I tell my white brothers and sisters, when you see black folk, you ought to just give them a standing ovation. Thank you for Martin Luther King Jr. Thank you for Fannie Lou Hamer. Thank you for these black freedom fighters that chose not to have black versions of the Ku Klux Klan. They chose love and justice over revenge and vicious hatred. That's achievement. That's a spiritual achievement, a moral achievement, not because of skin pigmentation, because you got a lot of cowards who are black.
That's true.
You got a lot of sellouts who are black. It's a human thing. It's a spiritual formation and moral cultivation and a willingness to act, to cut against the grain. And it had much to do with the Palestinian Jew named Jesus. But the black Jesus, oftentimes, was very different than the Jesus talked about on the other side of town.
Two more questions. Teresa has said, I thought, man, we hadn't even hit 5 o'clock yet. We're just getting warmed up. But two more questions, and we'll let these good people go home.
You all been very kind to come. I thank God it's not raining, though.
You ain't lying. Cornel, Putin. Is Putin does Putin augur a new era of, fascist, brutal intervention, or is he an aberration?
No, what Putin and Trump have in common is that they've always been sincere about their gangsterism.
Yeah.
Putin's always been a gangster. When he was with the KGB, he was a gangster. Even in the Soviet Union, given all the repression and regimentation. He's always been honest about it. But I tell you this, though, when you're dealing with gangsters, Trump's the same way, is that you try not to unnecessarily push their backs against the wall. You see, when the Soviet Empire collapsed in 1991 after the 1989 collapse of its Soviet countries. Gorbachev was promised that NATO would not move 1 inch toward the Soviet Union. And a decade or so later, it's 7. Now it's 13 countries have now joined NATO, so many of them circling right along on the border of Russia. Russia's already a wounded empire. You saw what happened with Weimar Germany in the 1920s when you're a wounded empire with Hitler. So that all of a sudden, the former Soviet countries become part of NATO, and what does the United States and NATO do? They move missiles in. You got missiles right across the border. What would the United States do if Russia had missiles in Mexico and Canada? They would blow them to smithereens. Quick, just look at Cuba in 1962. Now, that doesn't mean that Putin's not a gangster. Of course he's a gangster. Of course he's wrong. Of course those are atrocious, barbaric acts of invading our precious Ukrainian brothers and sisters. But you also have a context of expansionism of the U.S. and European sphere right up next to his border. So he's got to convince his people as a gangster that he can respond to that kind of expansionism. Now, you see, you don't hear this on television too much, but it's a reality. And all you got to do is just put America in the same situation. Mexico, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Canada were part of the organization of enemy states. United States would wipe them out quick.
So what's going to happen? How is it going to be resolved?
Well, first you had to begin with the tremendous courage of the Russian people who are willing to go to jail in their anti-war activity. If you are involved in a protest in Russia, you can go to jail for 7 years. How many Russians have gone to jail at this point? 18,000 Russians have gone to jail. That is serious anti-war activism. That's very important. That's crucial. Just think, Brother Jeff, if we were marching and everybody said, you want to go to jail for 7 years? Well,
not today.
No, I called my baby, 7 years, baby. No, I ain't waiting. No. Oh, yeah, I tell you, I want you to be true to your mission,
So is Ukraine going to win?
Well, it depends on, the dynamics inside of Russia right now, we don't know. They already have military folk who are not just critical of Putin, but there's internal conflict. And anytime you have an empire, you can never have change without having dissensus and conflict within the ruling group. And as they're at each other's throat, it makes it more and more difficult for the lies to be sustained. The only reason why Putin is able to do what he's able to do is because he's got a unity at the moment. But as that becomes weaker and weaker, maybe there's possibilities of change within Russia. Maybe he pulls back. Maybe he makes a concession.
Were you surprised at how fiercely the Ukrainian people defended themselves?
Oh, no. I've read Nicole Gogol. You all know the great Gogol of Dead Souls and the Gogol of the Nose and the Gogol of the Overcoat.
Oh, yeah.
He and Alexander Pushkin, who's the great black Russian figure. He's the father of Russian literature, Alexander Pushkin. But they go hand in hand. They were very close. And Gogol wrote in Ukrainian before he wrote in Russian. Ukrainians have a long history of heroic struggle against the Poles, against Russia, against a whole host of other imperial forces. So the Ukrainians are like the Iranians. Hey, they like the Palestinians. They like the Jews. They like black folk. Mess with us and see what's happening. Mess with us and see what's coming at you. They like the Irish. Mess with us for 800 years, Britain, and think you can sniff us out. No, we just keep coming. So I wasn't surprised, and I'm in deep solidarity with the Ukrainian brothers and sisters against. But that's just one aspect of it. You got China now with its empire.
So do you think China's going to invade Taiwan? I don't think so.
I wonder. I wonder, though, brother.
That'd be the end of Rin Tin Tin, man, you know.
Yeah, but that's true. So, I mean, and then we got the planet itself. You know, it might be that the whole planet goes under, and so we don't have to worry about too much discourse no more. We got to fight against that.
But what about,
But you got to go down fighting. All you can do is bear witness, let your light shine with style and a smile, with love in your heart, to be organized in solidarity with people who are suffering. And as T.S. Eliot put it, ours is in the trying, the rest is not our business. Now, he's a right-wing poet, but he's right on that point. And he's a great poet. Sister Gail read Lucille Clifton. Where is she? Give it up for Sister Gail.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, the poets.
All right, Cornel,
Poets are crucial.
final question, because we are under the rubric of the culture wars. Now, we're living through a new phase of what people like to call culture wars, because people of our generation know that there was another set of culture wars in the 90s. And the irony is that these culture wars are more extreme and tribal than ever before. Consider this irony, ladies and gentlemen. Back in the 90s, Cornel and I and our peers were using all our energies trying to get Zora Neale Hurston included in the Norton Anthology of American Literature, so she could be taught in schools, right?
That's right.
Now we're having to fight to keep Hurston and many other writers of color, feminists, gay authors from being banned from the same schools, having won the first set of culture wars. We won that. We got all of these anthologies. We got all of these English departments, all the curricula integrated. And now they're banning the books that we got integrated. How do we deal with this, Cornel? How do you see the culture wars today, especially when it comes to the issue of race in America?
Yeah, I think,
Final question.
well, that's the final one. Good God Almighty. And you again, though, brother, you got so many profound things to say on this, though, because your book on the canon, which year was that, the text on
92.
92. That's 4 years after your masterpiece, The Signifying Monkey. That you were right there in the vanguard of that struggle. But history's like that, it's mysterious. And it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And you always have to be fortified and make sure that you're willing to fight. I think part of our challenge was that we spent so much time on that one front, and it was a crucial front. It remains a very crucial front. But right when that was taking place, I've been blessed to teach in prisons for 42 years now. And you got some brilliant and magnificent human beings in prison. Some of them done some bad things, some of them there because of trumped up charges. But we've got a country where over almost half of our fellow citizens read at a 5th grade level. We got a country in which only 1 out of 3 of all of our fellow citizens ever see the inside of a college. So that if the fight is simply over what courses are taught in college, you're already missing 65% of the population who never go to college. And yet so much of the genius, especially the black culture, has come from folk who never went to college.
Absolutely.
James Baldwin never went to college, but 2 colleges went through him. Miles Davis went to Juilliard and dropped out. Curtis Mayfield dropped out in 8th grade. He's one of the greatest geniuses of the 1967s and 80s and 90s. We can go on and on. Does Stevie Wonder need to go to college?
Not to mention Bessie Smith,
Bessie,
Clara
we
Smith,
can go on
Mahalia
and
Jackson.
on and on. You see, you got all of this genius and talent in a lot of different places. Some of it's in college, some of it's in prison, some of it's in the church, some of it's in the mosque, some of it's in the temple, some of it's on the block. And for me, it's in the nightclubs, too.
Of course.
It's in the nightclubs. It's a lot of different places. And so when we think of these cultural wars, we don't want to confine the terrain to just what the television is talking about.
Sure.
Because corporate media has very little focus outside of the world of the professional managerial class. There's very little focus on the working. That's why you don't even have TV shows for the most part on working people and poor people. It's all everybody trying to make it, everybody trying to get over, everybody trying to make money and so forth and so on. And then all of the sexual insecurities and anxieties that go along with the manipulation and the domination, And we in LA, so let's just be honest about Hollywood. Let's be honest about, they know that's where the money is. That's where the cash is. But no, the history of black people is you're going to get a whole lot of genius and talent in places you did not expect. Louis Armstrong dropped out in the 7th grade, the greatest revolutionary artist of the 20th century, with levels of sophistication nobody had seen when it comes to a European instrument called the trumpet, a Coltrane on the saxophone, or Toni Morrison Catholic.
That's right.
Very important. We want to note that. It's like Shakespeare's Jesuit education. We don't know what his religion was, but you know he had a Jesuit education. Toni Morrison. Now, she's college and MA, but her novels are embracing of all folk of different classes and economic status and so forth.
Absolutely.
And if there's any real possibility of America undergoing democratic renewal, and we have to opt for that. I don't think that we could ever cave in to any fascist regime, no matter where it is. We have to just go down fighting, be willing to live and die, that's all. Tell our kids this is the best that we can do and pass it on to them. But if there's any possibility of that, it's to broaden our visions. You know, the great Henry James wrote to the less great Robert Louis Stevenson. Both of them towering writers. He wrote a powerful letter, January 12, 1901, where he said, "No theory is kind to us that cheats us of seeing. No theory is kind to us that cheats us of seeing." And one of the things Brother Skip was trying to teach folk in terms of bringing in Zora Neale and Baldwin and Albert Murray is that there's no theory that's kind to us that cheats us of hearing the cries of people across the board, wherever the suffering is, of feeling the suffering of other people wherever they are, and most importantly, of acting courageously and compassionately, not out of self-righteousness, and not only solely in the name of justice. Any justice that's only justice soon degenerates into something less than justice. You need more than just justice. You got to really care for the people. You got to love the people. You got to be able to bear burden for the people. That's not just justice. Justice quickly gets commodified, quickly gets weaponized for a polarized situation. But when you really have a care and a concern, like Ashford and Simpson say, the real thing, that's what we like. Any group, any figure, the real thing means you're going to tell the truth no matter what, you're going to bear witness no matter what, and we don't know which way history goes. Maybe fascism takes over. Maybe the planet gets completely dissolved. Maybe a comet hits the earth and is over. Who knows? But in the meantime, we got to live and love and laugh with style and with a smile. Oh, yes, indeed, indeed. And that's why we need each other. That's why we need each other.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Cornel West.
Lord, 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 yes.
Cornel West, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you all for coming. I wanted to say one last thing on our Catholic business. Bernard of Clairvaux, great 12th century abbot, said, labore est orare, to work is to pray. These men's work is prayer.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We can't finish you now.